Hey guys, today we're going to discuss the competitive use of the Iron Hands, the toughest chapter in the Codex Space Marines, and how to use them in games. I love them because they are so versatile and hard to shift, and I hope you love them too, so let's dive right in without further ado. And as the tradition dictates, we'll first talk about the strength of this chapter, and obviously I've already spoiled the surprise. They are very tough to kill, that's why they are so good. They are one of the best, probably competitively speaking, chapters out there since the 9th edition Codex dropped. They are not specialized like White Scars or Blood Angels who specialize on close combat. They are not the type of universal chapter like the Salamanders who have their power in the synergies of the melt and flamer weapons. The Iron Hands are good because they stay on the board longer than others, and when the units can stay on the board longer, it means that you can pump much more value out of them during the game. So what keeps them alive? Obviously it's the army-wide 6-up film pain that their chapter tactic allows them to have, and also their vehicles are much harder to degrade because they count as double the wounds characteristic for the purposes of the damage table. Having an army-wide 6-up film pain is incredible because, for example, your Terminator models, when they get hit with damage 3 weapons, it's an extremely efficient way to get rid of them. But when you got a 6-up film pain, you have a very good chance to soak up 2 of those wounds and have your Terminator live on one single wound and get the second wound into him before he actually goes down. So it allows your units to stay quite a while more on the table, especially those that are 2 or 3 or 4 wounds each. The only thing I don't like about this 6-up Funeral Pain army-wide is that some units, like for example Venerable Dreadnought, they don't benefit from the army-wide chapter tactic at all. So the Venerable Dreadnought already has a 6-up Funeral Pain and he does not degrade innately, so the chapter tactic basically gives him nothing at all. So that's the part of the lazy writing on the rules team part, but it's not that common, and usually you'll benefit from the chapter tactic quite a lot. Their Super Doctrine is a nice one. Only problem with that one is that it only is active when the Devastator Doctrine is active, and it's obviously only one turn a game, and that's not great. But the Doctrine, the Super Doctrine itself is nice. It's reroll once to hit with heavy weapons, which is great, especially for vehicles who cannot really get rerolls from anywhere else. And they also ignore -1 to hit for moving and shooting if you are an infantry model, because the vehicles already do that. But the rule was written back in the 8th edition when they didn't ignore the -1 to hit penalty for moving and shooting, so it was even better still. In addition to the incredible defense, they also get buffs from the Technomancer Discipline, the defensive buffs, and the stratagems. Plus, their stratagems list is one of the best ones in the Space Marine chapters. I know I've said that quite a lot about Salamanders, but the Iron Hands are also great in that regard, and the stratagems add a lot of versatility to an already pretty substantial list of stratagems from the main Space Marine book. They have some of the best defensive relics in the whole Space Marine family, and if you want your character to stay alive during the game, they are the best chapter for you. Also, they have this unique ability to make a Dreadnought a character for command point. It's a stratagem they have, March of the Ancients it's called. So you can basically make your 9 wound or less Dreadnought untargetable like a character, which was exploited quite a lot in the early days of this supplement, back when some of the stratagems were used in a different way and weren't FAQ'd. Nowadays it's a great stratagem because you can make, for example, your Venerable Dreadnought a character and have him sit behind your main line for as long as you want, pumping those multi-melter shots and not being able to be hit back. And once the time comes for him to come out, he can just come out of the shadows and charge whatever you need for him to charge. I've personally used this combination on a tournament once and it was a success. There are multiple ways to get more value out of your Tech Marines, and it's great because it further encourages the use of vehicles, which are obviously Iron Hand's friends. The world trades are also great. There's a good survivability trade, all flesh is weakness, a 5-up shrug, always great to have a 5-up shrug. Or also one I really like is the target protocols trait. It allows you to select at the start of your shooting phase a single friendly Iron Hands unit. It can be even not a core unit, so like a repulsor or Astreus for heaven's sake, and you can reroll a single hit roll, a single wound roll, and a single damage roll for that particular model. So a great well trait indeed, and it allows you to have basically more command points than you actually have, because you get a single reroll in each of those instances, as if you had multiple command points spent. Now about their weaknesses. They offer no extra mobility to the Space Marines, and the Space Marines are not the fastest army out there, so you will have to figure out this problem in the roster building part of your army. So you want to have something that is fast originally, natively, not for some special ability that your army gives. They can be pretty command point hungry, especially if you want to use some of those great stratagems that are in the book, especially if you want to upgrade a Dreadnought to be a character and also give him a warlord trait for hero of the chapter. So you will spend 2 command points on that combo, and if that Dreadnought for some reason is a relic Dreadnought, you will spend 3 for that. I have a typical Space Marine problem with HQ slots. I really dream that they will fix that in the new Space Marine Codex, because I hate the idea that in order to have a lieutenant and a captain in an army, I need to spend 2 of my 3 HQ slots in a battalion detachment. So I cannot possibly have a lieutenant, a captain, a chaplain, and a librarian in my army. Forget the tech marine. I cannot even have 4 in the single detachment, and it's very expensive to pay for other detachments to unlock the new HQ slot. So in order to utilize the great things about the tech marines that the Iron Hands provide, you will have to sacrifice something, either a librarian or a chaplain. I would probably sacrifice the chaplain, because the Technomancer discipline is very important for the lists, Iron Hands lists to work. It will be so thematic if they allowed for Iron Hands to take, for example, a tech marine without taking up an HQ slot. Just as the Emperor's champion should not take up an HQ slot in the Black Templar roster. Hopefully Games Workshop will fix that in the future, but we shall move on. The Doctrine buff is limited to the first turn for the whole army, and then you can unlock it for a single unit each turn for a command point, which is not bad, but obviously you would probably want your Doctrine buff to stay on longer. And they are very impatient, which is a small joke for some of you who know the history of the Horus Heresy. I'll say no more, because I don't want to spoil the fun for you. Always try to build a balanced force, I say in each of my videos, and for a good reason, because I figured out that if you want to perform well in tournaments, your list should probably be good against multiple opponents, and it means that it should perform well in all of the phases where the army is originally meant to be good at. So obviously if you're Necrons, I don't mean that you should be good casters, I mean that if your army can be good in the fight phase, it should probably have at least something that does well in the fight phase, and so on and so forth. I propose that we should follow the tried and tested route of reinforced Dreadnought list, because Dreadnoughts are great, especially they're great when they don't degrade and they have a feel no pain, so let's do that. Moreover, it would be stupid to ignore all those great tech marine shenanigans that the supplement provides for us, so if they encourage us to use more big vehicles, we ought to indulge. So, take 3 Redemptor Dreadnoughts with plasmas. I don't think that I need to explain why they are still one of the best units in the game, and when they don't degrade and when they are harder to kill, they are even greater still. They can be swapped with Contemptors, but obviously as Contemptors don't degrade innately, you will lose out on the second part of the chapter tactic, so probably less efficient there. I would probably take Redemptors instead. Make sure your backfield is safe as usual and provides value to the army. Eliminators with last fusel, especially now when they don't pay anything extra for that strength 8 AP3 damage 3 shot, I think they are awesome. And also they're awesome because the eliminators, they like to hide in the first turn before your first turn begins, hide behind buildings and then come out to be able to shoot. And it was always a problem because you were suffering that -1 to hit for the heavy weapon, and now if you're playing Iron Hands, you will not suffer that -1 to hit because of your super doctrine, so a double win for them. And also you will reroll once to hit because that's a heavy weapon, so a great combination. In any good Space Marine list, there shall be a brick of Terminators, of 10 Terminators with Lightning Claws nowadays, because they are incredibly efficient with Armor of Contempt, and they are very, very hard to kill. With Iron Hands, they're even harder to kill than with the original basic Space Marines, and they were pretty damn hard to kill as they were already. There also should be some speed in your force. As I said, the Iron Hands don't provide mobility to us, so we should provide it for ourselves. And I recommend to do that by using the assault squads, which are very, very cheap nowadays, and they don't take up the elite slot, which is usually pretty much occupied in the Space Marine lists. And also you get all the special weapons for free, most of them at least, so they will have some punch in the squad at least. You can also change that to Outriders or Vanguard Vets, depending on how your points allow you to shift the balance in your army. Outriders are nowadays cheaper than they were before. They are back to the original 45 points a model, which I was hoping for at least for like a year already. I was saying that they should cost 45 points. And the Vanguard Vets, they're great. The only problem with them is that they occupy the elite slot and they are not as tanky as the Outriders because they have 4 wounds and they have toughness 5. So it depends on what you are looking for. A light seasoning of Blade Guard, in my opinion, is a nice touch. If you want something to provide the distraction counter effects element for your army, as I've said in multiple videos, for example my last video about the deployment, which I highly recommend to watch, these kinds of units are very great to add the tactical flexibility to your army. That's why if you have the real estate, I recommend to have them. For the HQs, we cannot leave home without a Tech Marine. It would be foolish. Master of the Forge or not, he should be in the list. Next is the Librarian. The powers in the Technomancer discipline, as I said again already, are absolutely a must-have. You can choose a Primaris one or a Firstborn one, it does not really matter. Probably if you have those extra 5 points, go for the Primaris version because you'd have access to the Transhuman and you'd have the extra wound, which is sometimes important when you get up against the armies with snipers. So you have a better chance of surviving a couple of shots and then going back to cover to recuperate. And next is the Lieutenant Captain choice. Obviously, as I've mentioned already, you have a problem with HQ slots, so you probably need to choose one of them. You cannot really fit both, and in most cases I would recommend a Captain. But in the case of Iron Hands, where in the first turn they reroll hits of 1 automatically, I would probably go for the Lieutenant, because you should most likely have the real ones to hit all game from the Wisdom of the Ancients, which you would already be using because you want those real ones to wound, and now you'd probably only swap the choice and you will be getting those real ones to hit instead from the Wisdom of the Ancients, and the real ones to wound will be provided by your Lieutenant on the board. It worked out for me well, and perhaps it will work out for you as well. Lastly, the Chaplain. You aren't really a fighty chapter, you are more geared towards staying alive and fighting when the fight comes to you instead of coming to the fight yourself. So Chaplain is not most likely your first choice, and especially now when we've sacrificed a Captain or a Lieutenant, I don't think that it would be wise to spend the HQ slot on the Chaplain. We need a Tech Marine, we need a Librarian, and we need one of the Lieutenant Captain options. The troops, it's very simple. I usually take 2 squads of Assault Intercessors and a single squad of Infiltrators. I take Assault Intercessors for the basic troops element, for screening, to hold the objectives, etc. And the Infiltrators are great because they first of all, get you the ability to get the command point in the first turn when you're playing Recover the Relics. And they also help you to establish the board presence early on and give you a little bit of speed and maneuverability. And obviously your detachment should be a battalion. I've said it too many times already, and I don't think I need to explain why you don't want to spend the command points on the detachment in 9th edition right now. Just as a whole bunch of other supplements, the Iron Hands got their own personal Primaris character. In their case, it was the Iron Father Feirros, and he's basically your only named character in the Iron Hands book. He is a badass and chunky Tech Marine. He's very survivable, toughness 5, 7 wounds, 2+ save, 5+ shrug, and he's obviously Primaris, so you can use Transhuman on him. He's obviously Master of the Forge, so he heals 3 wounds straight on your vehicles, not D3, and he provides an aura of 5+ invulnerable save to your infantry units. Originally it was a general aura of 5+ invulnerable save, but they decided that it was too much and changed it quite quickly to only infantry. I don't understand why it at least does not help bikers, but for some reason it doesn't. Usually attack marines can awaken the machine spirit and add 1 to the hit rolls of a single vehicle unit within 3 inches of them in your command phase. This guy can select any Iron Hands unit within 3 inches of him, and that model and that unit and models in that unit gain ballistic skill of 2+ instead of just +1 to hit, which is mostly better because you cannot get worse than 3+ in this case, no matter how hard it is to hit the particular target. He fights pretty well with 6 attacks at strength 7, AP 2, damage 2, but he hits on 3s and not like characters, Space Marine characters they usually hit on 2s. And he also gets extra 2 attacks with his servo arms at strength 8, AP 2 and damage 3. And he costs 145 points. In all honesty, I don't think that you really need this guy in your roster. He does not provide anything that special or necessary to pay the extra price for him. But if you really like the model, all power to you. Now let's quickly discuss the secondaries. As all the supplements, the Iron Hands received their own unique secondary in the Nephilim update, so they now have the No Mercy, No Respite secondary called Cold Fury. At the end of your turn, score 1 victory point for each of the following conditions. You satisfy for a maximum of 4 victory points. Already I like this one because you score at the end of your turn, and usually the secondaries that allow you to score at the end of your turn are the best ones, because they allow you the maximum control on how you will get your points. If one or more Iron Hand vehicle units, excluding aircraft units, are from your army are wholly within your opponent's deployment zone, not really easy to do unless you have a very fast vehicle like a land speeder, which is something that you may want to consider if you want to use this secondary. One or more Iron Hands vehicle units are wholly within 6 inches of the center of the battlefield, not bad, because it basically mirrors what you get in the Oath of Moment now, because you used to score 2 victory points if your Adeptus Astartes unit was within 6, but nowadays you only score 1, so it's basically like the Oath of Moment in this case. One or more enemy units were destroyed by ranged attacks made by Iron Hands vehicle units from your army this turn. Pretty easy to do, nothing special here. And one or more enemy units were destroyed by melee attacks made by Iron Hands vehicle units from your army this turn. Again, not that hard to do, especially if you are running a lot of vehicle dreadnoughts. So ultimately you will probably get to some units and will be killing those. So I think it's a pretty good 8 or 9 victory points secondary that would be pretty easy to do, especially if you manage to get one of your vehicles into your opponent's deployment zone. It would not be very easy, I promise you that, but it's possible, especially if you have something speedy and dedicated to just that task. For example, simple Rhino will do just fine. So all in all, I think that you will be choosing between the Oath of Moment and Cold Fury, and it very much depends on how you've built your roster. If you have something that can reach your opponent's deployment zone, I would go for Cold Fury, but if you don't, I'd probably go for Oath of Moment, because the Oath of Duty part is less restrictive. You just need any core or character unit within 6 inches of the battlefield, of the center of the battlefield, and your no fallback, no fail morale is very easy to do, because Space Marines don't fail morale usually, and Oath of Valor, destroy any character, any vehicle or any monster, is easier than destroying something with a vehicle from your army. So sometimes you will be destroying your opponent's units with your Terminators, your characters, your troops, and not just vehicles, because even though you have a lot of vehicles in your Iron Hands force, they are not the only stuff you have there. So the first clause of the Cold Fury secondary is the point where I think you will be deciding between Oath of Moment and Cold Fury, whether you can get to the deployment zone of your opponent or not. If you can, big Cold Fury. If you cannot, Oath of Moment, it should be your choice. The shock tactics, I've always been kind of skeptical, because it's pretty hard to not only get your opponent off an objective, but also get an Adeptus Astartes unit to that objective and stay within range of it until the end of your turn. Not that easy to do, actually. The Codex Warfare, it's a pretty bad secondary, because it allows your opponent to control a lot how you score your points, and it always is bad because they can just hide in the first turn and you will be forced to waste your Devastator Doctrine, and those score 2 victory points at the end of the battle if you destroyed something with a heavy granite weapon whilst the Devastator Doctrine was active, so you will not get that. Then it will be very hard to destroy something with rapid fire and assault weapons for the second clause, and with the assault weapons and melee weapons in the third one. So I don't really recommend the Codex Warfare. You are much better off just taking your good old Assassination or the Bring It Down. Usually one of those will be a better choice than that. Now, my beloved synergy section. I always love this one because it's where the army usually comes together, and we start to understand how it will operate on the battlefield in a real game situation. Let's start with the Tech Marine. I recommend to spend those 20 points to make him a Master of the Forge, because you don't want to risk rolling that 1 on the D3 when you need to heal your Dreadnought. There are ways with relics and traits to make that more reliable. For example, the Fortress Pattern Data Spike relic allows you to roll 2 dice for the healing and pick the highest one, and the Warlord trait Adept of the Omnissiah allows you to add 1 to that roll. But you don't want to spend command points on that. You just want to spend 20 points and forget about the problem. So Master of the Forge is the better choice in my opinion, unless you want to run like a couple of Tech Marines in a very, very strange Tech Marine heavy list. Next is the Librarian. He should preferably be your Chief Librarian, because you want to take Psychic Mastery for him to make those powers go off as often and as reliably as possible. Those powers in the Iron Hands book, for some reason, most of them are Warp Charge 5, and the hardest is Warp Charge 6, so not that hard to cast in the first place, but I recommend to take Psychic Mastery anyways, because sometimes you will be playing against Tyranids and you will suffer that -1 to cast from the shadows in the warp, and sometimes other things will be messing with your cast, or sometimes you will just roll poorly and you will be very thankful that you have that +1 to cast in your back pocket. And also the reason to take the Chief Librarian is because you want to know those 3 powers. The Size Steel Armor, which is Warp Charge 6 +1 to the save within 12 inches, and that's the very important stuff for your Terminators. And Warp Charge 5 Reforge, it allows you to heal D3 wounds on a vehicle within 3 inches. You cannot stack that with the Tech Marine buff, the Tech Marine heal, but you can do that to another Dreadnought, and considering that you have a lot of vehicles in your army, a lot of times you will be able to heal multiple of those in a single turn. And the last one is Warp Charge 5 Blessing of the Machine God, a simple +1 to hit for your vehicle, and it helps you both in shooting and in combat. So great one to cast on, for example, your front Dreadnought, which you know is going to be charging in your charge phase and will be fighting, so the Redemptor Dreadnought hitting on 2s is an incredible thing to have. A very good psychic power, and it's only Warp Charge 5, so with your Psychic Mastery it's even that much easier to cast at Warp Charge 4. When it comes to the aforementioned Terminator brick, now we come to the main combo of the force of the list. We want to cast that Size Steel Armor buff on them. A 0-up save with Armor of Contempt is just crazy. Just imagine having a 4-up save against a Melta Shot, and in cover it's a 3+ save against a Melta Shot, and it's a base save against AP3 weapons. Just crazy. But it does not end there, because you already have 6-up Feel No Pain on them, but for just 1 command point, and it's 1 command point even on a unit of 10, with the Reject the Flash, Embrace the Machine stratagem, you can get a 5-up Feel No Pain on that unit for the entire phase. And try to imagine just trying to shift a unit of 10 Terminators with 0-up save and 5-up shrug. It's incredibly tough to do. And on the offensive side, if you want them to be even more deadly, but you already have the 50 attacks with their Lightning Claws with full rerolls to wound and AP 2 or 3 if you're in the Assault Doctrine, which is not bad already, but you can make any wound roll of a 6 turn into 2 wounds with the Mercy is Weakness stratagem. Obviously, if you really want something dead, you should use the 1 command point Fury of the first stratagem from the original Space Marine book for your Terminators to get +1 to hit. Or alternatively, you can go for the Gorgon's Rage, which allows any Iron Hands units to get +1 to hit in combat. And obviously, if you're targeting Emperor's Children, you get also +1 to wound, but how often do you encounter Emperor's Children on the tabletops? Not very often is the answer. So that's why we want those Terminators in our lists. They are incredible as is nowadays. They cost 33 points a model and they do a lot of work for you. But in Iron Hands, they get to an absolutely different level. I also really like the idea of a small character Dreadnought who hides behind the backs of Redemptors and jumps out at an opportune moment. Also, you can give him the Student of History water trait to help him run away each time he fights, so he can basically charge and after fighting consolidate 6 inches in any direction, not just closer to the closest enemy unit. So he can be very sneaky and very annoying at the same time. Also, don't forget that the stratagem March of the Ancients that provides the character keyword for that Dreadnought also gives him +1 attack and +1 leadership, which is a nice bonus when you consider that you want him to be charging something. If you have a primary captain or lieutenant in your force, which you probably should, I recommend the following loadout for them. The Aegis Pharaon Relic, which is a -1 damage relic, which would already be incredible, but you also get +1 toughness in addition to that. As I said, the Iron Hands have one of the best sets of defensive relics in all Space Marine books. And the Target Protocols water trait, which we've already discussed, the one that gives a single reroll to hit, to wound and damage to a single chosen unit within 6. Other stratagems that I recommend to remember are the 2 command points Souls of Iron. It's the one that I was talking about when I said that they are CP hungry. You really want to use that strat when you are fighting against a psychic heavy army and want to deny something very, very important to them, but obviously 2 command points is really steep. But for a 4-up deny within 24 inches of any Iron Hands unit, I think it's very much worth it. And 1 command point Mythological Firepower, which is the one that turns on the Devastator Doctrine for a single unit, you can use it at the start of your movement phase, so you unfortunately cannot do that on, for example, a unit of Devastators which have just arrived in a drop pod. You will not be able to use it on them, but it's great anyways because it will give you extra AP for Devastator Doctrine and the reroll ones to hit from the Super Doctrine buff. And the last one I really like is the Optimal Repulsion Doctrines. It allows you to fire Overwatch and hit on 4 to 6 instead of just 6. It was even greater back in the 8th edition when Overwatch was free. Nowadays, to use that stratagem, you will first need to spend a command point to fire Overwatch and then spend a single command point to fire that Overwatch and hit on force. But sometimes in some crucial situations when you are being charged by a very, very nasty unit that you really want to try to kill before they get a chance to fight with you, it may be useful. And the last but not least are the relics. I like the Ironstone relic if you are running something crazy like an Astraeus, so you can get -1 damage like a Dreadnought to a single vehicle unit within 3 inches. It used to be an aura and was crazy back in 8th, but they've nerfed it quite a bit, and now you must select a single vehicle unit. And if you want to run a Land Raider or that super heavy tank I mentioned before, it's a great one, but otherwise non-essential. Tempered Helm, a 5-up command point regain. It used to be awesome, but nowadays when you need to first spend one of your precious command points, which are very rare in Nephilim, and then only then you will have the chance to regain the command point back each time you spend it, it's not that great of a deal. The Gorgon's Chain, again another great defensive relic. It gives your character 4-up invulnerable save, awesome on something like a Librarian or a Lieutenant without a shield, which they don't have an invulnerable innately, and you also get -1 to wound from ranged attacks. Awesome, especially when you want to protect your Librarian or your Lieutenant from snipers, which is sometimes a thing you can encounter. Haywire Bolts is a typical bolt type weapon upgrade that does D3 mortal wounds to vehicles on a modified wound roll of a 4-up and 3 mortal wounds if you roll a 6 to wound. Cool on an Eliminator Sergeant, otherwise I would not recommend to spend a command point on it. And the Axe of Medusa, an awesome power axe, strength 7, AP 3, damage 3. If you want to run a cool melee tech marine all power to you, but obviously it's not something that you would really want to spend command points on if you're trying to build something competitive. Here's the roster that I've built. As you can see, I don't have a Master Librarian here, Chief Librarian, sorry. I have a regular one because, as I already said, the powers that you need to cast are very easy to cast. So in this case, I just didn't have the points, the 25 points to upgrade the Librarian to the Chief status, but that's something that you may ponder and consider and do in your own roster. Just some options for you there. Also a Primaris Lieutenant with the regular loadout that I recommend in all my lists, the Neovolkite Pistol and the Storm Shield and the Mastercrafted Power Sword, obviously the Aegis Ferrum Relic on him, and the Warlord Trait Target Protocols. The Tech Marine is the Master of the Forge in this case, and no other upgrades on him. 3 units of Assault Intercessors for the troops, 3 Redemptor Dreadnoughts with Plasmas and Onslaught Gatling Cannons, 1 Terminator Assault Squad with dual Lightning Claws, 1 Venerable Dreadnought with the Melta and the March of the Ancient Stratagem to make him a character, 2 fast attack units of Assault Squads with all the specials that you can buy for free, and the heavy support slot is filled with 3 units of Eliminators with last fusils, and all that comes down to 3 command points and 2000 points on the nose. So that's it, guys. I hope this video was useful for you. I really like the Iron Hands because they allow us to play the generic Space Marines in the most powerful way. If you don't want to build something specialized with some strange bells and whistles like the Salamanders, the Blood Angels, the White Scars, etc., if you want to play just regular Space Marines but make them as powerful as possible, I think the Iron Hands are the perfect choice. So if you have any other questions, please let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you next time.